This is the Marketing Umbrella Podcast, where it's all about getting the information you need from successful leading marketers to build and grow your digital marketing agency. Brought to you by Itamar Shafir, founder and CEO of Umbrella, the technology platform and brand that is powering thousands of marketing agencies around the country. Find him at umbrellaus.com. Now, here's your host, Kevin Prewett.
This is Kevin Prewett with the Marketing Umbrella Podcast, and my guest today on the podcast is the founder of agencysalesdesign.com, where he helps agency owners to generate a pipeline that actually increases revenue, not just book meetings, as well as helping you sleep a little better at night. He previously led a 100-person agency and more recently started and exited a digital PR agency in 2022. He's also a sales prospecting coach and has taught over 1,000 students. Hailing from the UK and now living in Lisbon, Portugal, join me in welcoming my special guest, Mark Colgan. Mark, thanks for joining us on the podcast.
Hey, Kevin, thanks for that kind intro. And yeah, very happy to be here.
So we've had a little chat pre Big Red Button recording, and we probably lived pretty close to each other at one point in time because I was just outside of South London and he was kind of southwest London.
Yeah, southwest. Yeah.
Okay. So not very far, probably a driver 9-iron from maybe apart from each other. But Mark, I just really appreciate you taking time today. But outside of that relatively short intro, man, kind of round it out a little bit. What's missing from your bio?
Oh, okay. How long do we have, Kevin? So I'll do the short version of my, I guess, career history. And when I first started in work, I actually started in recruitment. And a lot of people don't understand that when you work for a recruitment agency, there's business development is one side of the role. And then the other half is the candidates and listening to the candidates and understanding how to interpret their experience and then present them in a way that would be appealing to the hiring manager. So what I didn't realize I was doing was learning sales and also learning marketing and positioning. This is back in the day where there wasn't really the role of digital marketing manager. No one had a clue how to build a website. And I was working in a HR team recruiting for marketers. And I actually studied marketing at university, and I saw that there was a ton of people asking for marketing managers or web managers, as they were called back then. So I started to teach myself digital marketing. And in fact, there's a book behind here, which is Web Marketing for Dummies. And I read it from front to back and absorbed everything I could and actually put it into practice. That led me to getting a role in marketing where I was always usually the first digital hire. So responsible for anything to do with online. And I worked.
Does that mean you could do whatever you wanted to?
Pretty much. They didn't actually know what
they didn't know
my
what you were doing well
should be.
Right.
Yeah. Like I want to set up an automation, and I remember saying, yeah, this is going to take a while. It took me 5 minutes, but I could delay the work I was doing to manage the expectations there. Worked in marketing for several years. And then I moved in, then I decided to take a career break. So I went straight from university into work, and then decided that just before I turned 30 to take a year off. And that's where I got the bug for two things, which was not bed bugs, which is what's happening in Paris at the moment as we record this. The first thing was I could work remotely. So I had a skill, which was back then.
Before this was cool, probably.
This is before it was cool. Yep. A CRM implementation. So HubSpot was the main tool that I'd been implementing in these companies. And then secondly, number one, I had a skill. Number two, I could do this remotely. And I never looked back, in the sense that I never went back to an office job after that. But in the following years, I ended up running my own consultancy, which was doing marketing automation builds and setup for people. And that was a roller coaster ride of busy with clients 1 month, and then neglected pipeline the next month, and then busy and quiet. After that, I moved into running that 100-person remote company that I mentioned before, again, still before it was cool. And then as COVID happened, I decided to set up my own agency with a co-founder, which was that podcast guest booking service agency, which I exited in 2022. I had my second mini retirement of my life at the beginning of this year. I took 6 months off, which was very nice position to be in. And now more recently, I'm helping agency owners with the sales. So I love sales. I love agencies. I wish I had me sometimes when I was running my agency, because you're responsible for sales oftentimes, especially if it's a smaller agency. And, even if you know what you should be doing, you just don't have the time to do it.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm focusing on now.
So I'm trying to remember, because I look at a number of different profiles on LinkedIn, at any given time, but it seems like to me that I was looking kind of at your experience, and it like kind of went on and on and on. Like there were a number of different, listings there. And I'm thinking, he is the prototypical, I got to do my own thing. I mean, he's almost unemployable.
I think I am. Yeah.
So it was funny to look at the list of things. I did this job long enough to, either I decided on my own to leave, or maybe they asked me to go do something else type thing. So it is interesting, the different guests we have and their, like their employment history and how it has impacted what they're doing now. That nothing's wasted in that, in that history.
Well, I won't name the company, but so I worked in some very large organizations. In the UK, we call it the FTSE 100 or the FTSE 50. So I worked for a FTSE 50 and a FTSE 100. And on numerous occasions, I was told to stay in my box and I'm being too much of a lone wolf, even though I'm producing 5 times the results of the people that I'm working with. But what I learned is I'm making my colleagues look bad by doing a better job.
Including your manager.
Including my manager, including the head of. And I just decided that why do I want to, or why should I stay in a box if there's so much more that could be done? And then, as you can see in as you highlighted, my experience on LinkedIn, very unemployable from a CV point of view anyway.
I mean that with all due respect and admiration. There's nothing pejorative about that. You're being unemployable. I think that's a great thing in our space. But let's talk about the current state of affairs. So let's talk about your company that you're leading right now. Walk us through that, kind of the birth of that. What was the genesis idea that said, hey, this is where we're going to lock in?
Sure. So as I mentioned, I took 6 months off at the beginning of the year. I was only going to take 3 months off, but it took me about a month and a half just to learn how to relax again after going through the exiting of an agency. And I had enough savings in the bank that I could extend it a little bit more. But what I used that time for is to think, what do I want to do next and what don't I want to do? And what were some of the lessons learned from the previous experience and agencies that I've been involved in? And how could I apply the work that and the knowledge that I have in the future? And there was one question that really helped me cement the idea of what I wanted to do next. And it was, where can I add the most value to people with the skills I already have? And with my background in sales and the experience of being an agency owner, I thought, well, why don't I just marry those two? And I've done a lot of consulting with B2B software companies in the past, Kevin, but they need thousands of new customers depending on how much money they've raised and how much pressure they have from VCs. As an agency owner, I just needed 3 new customers a month, and for the life of me, couldn't get them, or they were closing a lot. They were closing a lot slower. And I knew that working with an agency is potentially more life-changing and more impactful than it would be working with a well-funded VC SaaS company. So the idea of me being able to help a sales owner an agency owner feeling overwhelmed with all of their sales and not knowing what to do, to not feeling overwhelmed, knowing exactly what to do and closing more deals, to, as I mentioned in my bio, to sleep easy at night, but also pay yourself a decent rate and the rate that you deserve. I found myself, and I'll pause in a second, but I found myself thinking, I'm an agency owner, but this agency owns me. And that's not what I signed up for.
You just created another job for yourself, and now you have 50 bosses instead of one. But let's touch on that just a minute. What you were talking about, I only need 3 clients or whatever it is. How do you manage? Because I think that's true for so many of our listeners in this space. Like they have a small number of clients that they work with that it's enough to to really generate a nice monthly recurring revenue type thing. But how do you manage the idea that, in 1 month I can lose 2 of those 3 and I've got staff to pay, or I've got contractors that I've agreed to on a project basis, or got VAs or whatever that is? I mean, that seems like such a slim margin, to operate in. How do you kind of keep people kind of like in the holding tank ready to go at any given time? How do you manage that?
Yeah, so it sounds so simple, but a really powerful position that you can be in is turning down work. Yet we don't ever put ourselves in that situation. And there's a right way to turn down work,
Sure.
and obviously there's a bad way of turning down work. But I say to a lot of my clients, like, revenue doesn't solve all of your problems, but it does solve most of them. And it also frees up your capacity to focus on some of the other challenges, which might be growth in terms of hiring new staff. It might be rolling out a new service or product line. So really get yourself into a position where you have that consistent pipeline. And a lot of the clients I work with, the first thing that I'll do is I'll focus on the sales process, first of all, and the pipeline that they already have. Because oftentimes there's a number of deals within the pipeline that need some support to actually close. And therefore, the answer isn't net new pipeline at the very beginning. That can come later. So, optimize your sales process, optimize the way that you manage your pipeline, have a clear idea of what to do with a deal, and maybe analyze to see why a deal's not closing and how can you remove the friction and speed up that journey. So that kind of solves a part of it. And then the other part is the way that I typically do it is maximizing your referrals strategy, your word of mouth strategy as well. So that's referrals from your own clients, but then also word of mouth and referrals from your network. We all could list around 20 people who know what we do and know who we work with, but they just need a reminder that we're still here. We're not struggling per se, but we're on the lookout for one or two new clients. Then the last thing I do is typically look at setting up an outbound prospecting campaign, which is one of my core strengths. However, that comes last, which I love. Clients don't like to hear it, but they see the value that going through the sales process and the pipeline optimizations and kind of exhausting some of the lower hanging fruit opportunities first brings in revenue quicker than setting up an outbound prospecting campaign from scratch.
Have you almost, I can see the progression. It makes perfect sense, that the 3-step, progression you just mentioned there, but are the potential clients, current or potential clients that fit in each of those categories, do you almost value them differently? Do you value current clients more than you would value a potential prospective? Maybe value is not the right word. You kind of understand what I'm maybe asking is like, it makes perfect sense to start and try to, add-ons and how can you upsell and those types of things where you're current, and then go to referrals because it's still a warm network before you jump in the cold pool, So
absolutely.
How to talk about that, the difference in maybe those 3 levels.
Yeah. So that's a great question. And I like to think of revenue expansion strategies. So what can we upsell or cross-sell? Who is renewing soon? And are we doing anything about those clients that are likely to renew? And then the clients that we're working with, they have friends who work in the same role as those as them in different companies. So revenue expansion is upsell, cross-sell, renewal, and referral. And a very simple exercise, but often not carried out by agency owners, just because we're busy with all of the other fires to put out, is to make a list in a spreadsheet, nothing super fancy, just a spreadsheet of all of the clients that you're working with, when they're likely to renew, and where they are in their journey of working with you. Are they just at the onboarding stage and they haven't felt the full value of your service just yet? Maybe it's not the right time to ask them for something. However, if they're reaching the 50% part of the service or coming to the end of the service. So to give a real tangible example, at Speak on Podcasts, we would book people on other people's shows. They would buy a package of 10 or 20 interviews and we would work on their campaign until we finished that milestone. We would never ask anything from our clients until we had at least got them on 3 shows. Another milestone was when their first interview went live. So that's the first time that they've seen the true value of the service. They've had a great experience, but they've done the interview, but the interview took a couple of months to be edited and then put into the playlist or the schedule. But only then do they hear themselves back and see how that interview came out. So for us in that milestone, so I call these the moments that matter in the client's journey. That's how I like to think about it. It's an exercise I do with my clients. For us at Speak on Podcasts, what we used to do is take their first podcast interview and repurpose it for them. We would actually create the content for them. And then we would say, oh, and this is a service we can offer.
Yep.
You've got several podcasts that are going to be coming live. You can purchase a package of 5 podcast interviews to be repurposed for X amount of money. So that's a good way to tie a delivery or a milestone that you're delivering with an upsell, or sorry, a cross-sell service in that example.
That makes perfect sense. And as you were talking, it was almost the idea was going through my mind. It's almost like a maturing of your client relationship. You know, the deepening, like the retention percentage is increasing as the further, the deeper they get into the pool here. But that makes perfect sense, and that you're setting those milestones. And now the other one is like, let's step into the referral side of things. I mean, is there also a formula to that? I mean, because otherwise, if I haven't heard from you in 3 years, and all of a sudden you just ping me and say, "Hey, Kevin, how are you doing? Hey, by the way, can you tell me, I'm looking for these 10 people, 10 types of people. Can you refer these to me?" It just feels a little spammy. I mean, are you doing a regular communication in that network outside of asking for referrals?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of things to unpack here. So I think when it comes to client referrals, so a current client that I'm working with, I would again tie that ask to a milestone achievement, to the end of a campaign, to the halfway point of a campaign, or a gift. There's also ex-customers of yours who have moved to different companies now. So that's also another exercise to do, is take a list of clients that you used to work with, see if they're still working in the same organization. And if not, and you did a great job for them, reach out to them and ask them how their new job is going at X, Y, and Z. So that's on the client side. So you've got current clients and ex-clients or past clients. When it comes to, then there's 2 other things now. There's your network of people, which I've got a lot of business friends, Kevin. I've never met them in real life, but we speak about business, we catch up. I've either partnered with them in the past or we've collaborated in some way or another. Right. I feel like those are my inner circle of my referral network, who I will just constantly update to let them know what I'm up to. But most of the time that starts out with, how are things with you? What can I do to help you? Yeah. And that's how I start. And it's not always a give and take. It's like, I don't always ask them for a referral, but most of the times they say, what can I do to help you back? So that could be a very easy way to start that part. And then the last thing with referrals is every discovery call that you have with a potential prospect is a potential referral call as well. At the end of the call, if you just slightly introduce a small sentence into your script saying, "Hey, Kevin, now that we've explained what we do and how we work, I appreciate that this isn't the right time for you, or this service actually isn't right for what you're looking for, but do you know anybody else that would find it valuable?" And that's a great way to turn a discovery call that wasn't going in your favor to potentially being positive, potentially having a positive outcome for you. Yeah,
I love that idea, but tell me if you had to take a shot in the dark, percentage wise, what's the success rate of that?
Yeah, so I did do this analysis back last year. I'm not sure what the current updates are, but it was anywhere between 10 to 15% we would get referrals. But what I made sure that I did when I was handling these calls is I would qualify somebody out quite quickly, but say, "Hey, look, we've got 20 minutes. Let me help you with what it is that you really need help with." Because sometimes they book a call thinking that this was the best strategy. So then I'd say, "Well, no, actually, you said you need leads, and leads isn't the main outcome of speaking on a podcast. It's content, it's brand awareness. You can generate leads, don't get me wrong, but if you need leads right now, we're not the right service for you. Not because we're bad, not because we don't do a good job. It's just not right for you. So what you need to focus on, in my opinion, is A, B, and C. Yeah. And let me introduce you to this person. Let me introduce you to that company." So by giving first without expecting anything in return, and then adding in the ask at the end, 10% was what we saw of those referrals, 10 to 15.
I mean, that's amazing. I mean, I would thought the percentage would have been even, I mean, that's a free 10% that you didn't have before, just for asking. So what a great strategy.
That's right. Again, it took my time. I spent that time. I was genuinely interested in helping them. So you can't inauthentically do this, but that's what we did see.
Yeah, it's not it's not for you. How about 10 names of your friends that I can spam?
Exactly. Yeah.
Right after this, but and I love the fact that you are, regardless of if the service fits or not, you're still trying to help them. in that discovery call and say, how can we help move the needle?
The way that I think about it is that oftentimes it's just a little bit of a gap that they need to plug in before they can work with us. So if I can help them plug in that gap and come up with the solution that they need, they'll hopefully remember the good person that I was, the fact that I helped even though there was nothing in it for me, and then come back. And I couldn't tell you the percentage, but what I can tell you is that I've got a client now who's worked with me in the last 4 companies I've been involved with. And I think that just goes to show how much of the time that you invest in people, they stick with you. And whether they were a client or just a prospect, people do. They remember that it's not hard to do a great job. And so many people don't do a great job.
And it's worth the effort, that extra effort for sure, that going that extra mile. But you had mentioned earlier a little bit about, you kind of started this agency based on, lessons that you had learned and you wanted to kind of put into practice. Unpack one or two of those lessons, because I mean, we're speaking to our audience of agency owners here, and others in kind of related to that space. So I think it would be, pretty germane to what they do. So what are some things that you learned that you put into practice?
Okay, great question. So I think the first thing is to, as much as you can, sell a painkiller, not a vitamin. So sell a must-have.
That one. That's right.
Yeah, sell a must-have, not a nice-to-have. So with the world of speaking on podcasts, we had some clients who were investing in their brand and they wanted to leverage speaking on podcasts as a strategy for doing so, alongside myriad of other campaigns that they were running. But for some of our smaller clients or the prospects that we worked with, it was a nice to have to be on podcasts. They had other things they needed to do first before going to speak on podcasts. So if I'm looking at the services that I can offer based on my skills and with that knowledge, I want to offer something which is as close to generating revenue for somebody as possible. The one step closer I could say is, look, I'll take all of your sales calls. I'll do the sales calls and I'll close X amount of deals. That's not something I particularly want to do. I enjoy working remotely, as we were talking about before, and sometimes working from a coffee shop, or sometimes working from under the sun with a beer on a Friday as I just do my admin. So that was something that I personally didn't want to, is to be tied down to fixed times and schedules. But selling something which is that must have, selling something which is as close to revenue as possible makes makes the sales process much easier. So I'll pause there.
No, that makes great sense. And I think so often we're trying to talk people into things versus identifying what they really, really need. And I mean, that's two completely different approaches, for the sales process, for sure. I'm sure that maybe you had to learn that through, some hard knocks here.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of ghosted prospects and people not moving forward and deals stalling. I think another lesson learned, which doesn't apply necessarily to what I'm doing right now, but one I think your audience might find valuable, is the previous 2 agencies were productized services. So we sold the same service to multiple customers, to different clients, sorry. But the way that we delivered the service was pretty standardized within the business, which allows you to have an element of scale and predictability in terms of how you operate the business and your capacity planning. Right. One of the things that we didn't think about when we first started, and this is because both my co-founder and I knew how to do the thing that we were going to sell, was that there wasn't many other people that knew how to do the thing that we were doing, which is researching to find the right podcasts, understanding our clients, see what they can talk about, what's the interesting nugget that they can share, how do you present that information and package it, and then how do you reach out? So if I was to do it again, I would sell a service. If I was to build an agency and want to grow, never say never, Kevin, but at the moment, I'm just taking a break from managing lots of people and just managing myself and my schedule. If I was to do it again, I would sell a service where there is already a marketplace of individuals who know how to do it. So like graphic design being a really, really obvious example, or even closer to sales, if I'm following my own advice, I would offer Salesforce consulting but there's lots of people who are already certified as Salesforce administrators. So I don't have to train them on how to actually work Salesforce, how to do the work within Salesforce, because they already have that knowledge and expertise. So the challenge that it gave us was that a lot of our people that we hired were great people, but they took 2 or 3 months to be fully up to speed.
Mm-hmm.
And that meant that you have to kind of overhire sometimes to plan your capacity to make sure that you have enough staff to deliver the work that you're selling.
Yeah, that is, I really, that's an interesting, that second point is really interesting about, starting or selling a product where there's already a talent marketplace in place versus just, trying to train everyone from scratch that you would bring on, because it's that would be just create another job for myself,
Exactly. Yeah.
That really is an interesting approach. But we touched on so many different things, and I've chased a lot of rabbits here, but what's one thing that we haven't touched on that you think would be helpful, for our audience to hear right before we kind of shift into the rapid fire round?
Sure. Okay. So I'll share some of the most common mistakes I see in the clients that I work with and the conversations in general that I have with agency owners. So the first one is not having a clear idea of who your ideal customers are and who the buyers are within that ideal customer. So a lot of the times when I'm starting the qualification process for myself with potential clients, the agency owner will say, yeah, we sell to any company. And I'm like, right, okay. So
then you
when
sell
you
to
say,
nobody. That's right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I give some really obscure examples. So I say, oh, there's a company that produces garments for nurses. Would you sell to them? And like, oh no, nothing like manufacturing. And I was like, oh, okay, right. So tech, yeah, any tech company. And I'm like, okay, let's go down that rabbit hole. Is it a tech company that has raised no money and they haven't got a product and they're looking for product market fit, or they're searching? Oh, no, we wouldn't work with them. So there's a back and forth, tongue in cheek from me as well. Exactly. This is the way that I enjoy working. So it's really nailing down who are those ideal customers. And I think as well, some clients of mine think they can only have one. But you can have multiple clients, ideal clients. So Speak on Podcast, for example, B2B technology companies that had raised a round of funding was a great segment and a great ideal customer for us. Agency owners were equally a great ideal customer for us, especially those more established agencies who potentially had around 50 to 100 members of staff. And their CEO's job now was to spread the word about the agency, not to be in the weeds trying to control everything. They built a senior leadership team. So that became our kind of criteria that we would look for when we were looking to find some of these ideal clients. So that would be the first thing, is spend more time on your ideal clients and then really spend the time understanding what the challenges and problems are that your clients are facing that you can help solve for them.
That is... that's kind of goes back to the product market fit. I mean, so often I think we build things and then go try to find somebody that fits the thing we built versus identifying the itches that they have so we can scratch it, type thing. But it is, I love those 2 points. They are, and I appreciate you kind of tacking those on, on top of the, lessons learned, because that is, I think you're right. I think that is so apropos to, our listening audience and things that they are going to struggle with and face every day. But we're going to shift gears here. Buckle up. We're okay. It's time to put the proverbial seatbelt on and just rapid fire. Just answer the first thing that comes to mind. Very short, concise answers. And there's a method to our madness as we're asking these questions. You're going to think these are crazy questions, but all right, here goes. Here's the rapid fire. Did you get along with your parents growing up?
Yes, I did.
Do you have siblings?
One younger brother.
Do you currently have a pet or pets?
2 cats.
Any children?
Not yet.
What time do you wake up in the morning?
7:30, 7:45.
What time do you go to bed at night?
11 to 12.
Ideal vacation spot, money not an object.
Oh, that I'd love to go back to the Philippines and Vietnam.
How does faith affect your business work, business life?
Not not faith from a religious point of view, but faith and belief in myself. I think without sounding too arrogant, you need to have a little bit of faith in yourself.
And if you could change your king for a day, your King Charles for a day, if you could change one thing in the marketing space globally, what would that be?
In the marketing space, I would force, if I was king, I guess I could force every marketer to have at least 2 hours of calls or meetings with customers.
Is that a day, week, month?
Oh, sorry, a month. Let's just say a month.
I love you had to give me just a second because I've got to write that down because that is such a great thing. 2 hours a month. That makes perfect sense. So why?
I feel like so many of us marketers are a bit scared of speaking to customers, but the only way to truly position any product or service to truly serve the audience that you are hoping to help, you have to know them. You have to get to know them. You have to be able to look them in the eye and hold a conversation with them and not be afraid of having those conversations. And I feel recruitment and learning how to interview people definitely set me up in a really strong position. But the amount of times I've been in a room where I'm the one that knows the littlest about the topic, but I just ask 3 or 4 sharp questions, which can be used in different scenarios as well, positions you as somebody who knows what you're talking about, and then I get to learn a ton.
I'm so glad I asked that question because you really kind of tied a bow around our entire interview just with that closing thought. And because it really, you hearken back to things you had mentioned earlier in the podcast and kind of drew it together. But Mark, thanks again just for taking time today. It's been a real pleasure to have this conversation and just hear your heart and soul behind the business that you're building and really just sharing value as a subject matter expert, helping marketing agency owners grow and scale their agency. Mark, thanks again for coming on the Marketing Umbrella podcast. We really appreciate it. Have a great week.
Cheers, Kevin. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to another great episode of the Marketing Umbrella podcast, where we provide the information you need from successful leading marketers to build and grow your digital marketing agency. To learn more, go to umbrellaus.com.